The darkness of space stretched endlessly before the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge as it moved through the Kepler sector. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the asteroid field ahead with careful eyes. He had been exploring space for 7 years now, but every mission still filled him with wonder. The stars looked different out here, far from Earth, like scattered diamonds on black silk. "Commander, we're picking up something strange," said Marcus Webb, his first officer. Marcus pointed at his screen where unusual energy readings flickered across the display. "There's a heat signature between those two large asteroids. It doesn't match anything natural." Jake leaned forward, studying the readings. His instincts told him something was wrong. Heat in the cold vacuum of space usually meant only one thing: a ship. "Take us closer, but stay alert. Charge the weapons just in case." As the Horizon's Edge moved carefully through the asteroid field, dodging spinning rocks and debris, the source of the energy became clear. A vessel was wedged between two massive asteroids, its hull crushed and torn in several places. The ship's design was unlike anything Jake had seen before. It had smooth, organic curves and a shimmer to its metal that seemed almost alive. "That's a Volari ship," said Dr. Lisa Chen from her station. She was the ship's medical officer and had studied alien species more than anyone else on the crew. The Volari are highly advanced but very private. They rarely interact with other species. What would one of their ships be doing out here, damaged like this? Jake felt a cold weight in his stomach. "Scan for survivors and look for any other ships in the area. This damage looks fresh, which means whoever did this might still be nearby." The scans came back quickly. "I'm reading 2 life signs, Commander," Marcus reported. "Both are weak. One is extremely weak, maybe minutes from death. The other seems younger, smaller." "Prepare a boarding team," Jake ordered immediately. "Lisa, grab your medical kit. Marcus, you're with me. The rest of you keep watching those scanners. If anything moves out there, I want to know about it." 10 minutes later, Jake and his team were floating through the ruined corridors of the alien vessel. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting strange shadows on walls marked with burns and blast holes. The air was thin and cold. Jake could see his breath forming small clouds inside his helmet. They found the first body near what looked like a control room, then another, and another. The Volari were tall, elegant beings with skin that seemed to glow faintly even in death. Each one had been killed by weapon fire, precise and brutal. This wasn't an accident. This was an attack. "Over here," Lisa's voice crackled through the radio. "I found the survivors." Jake pushed himself through a doorway into a small room. What he saw made his heart clench. A Volari woman lay on the floor, her chest rising and falling in shallow, desperate breaths. Blood that looked almost silver pooled beneath her. In her arms she clutched a small child, protecting the little one even as her own life slipped away. The child looked up at Jake with enormous eyes that sparkled with tears. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Her small hands gripped the dying woman's clothing, and she was making soft, frightened sounds. Lisa immediately knelt beside them, scanning the woman with her medical equipment. After a moment, she looked at Jake and shook her head slightly. The woman was too far gone. Even with their advanced medical technology, there was nothing they could do. The dying Volari woman's eyes focused on Jake. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then Jake felt something he had never experienced before. It was like a voice inside his head, gentle but desperate. The woman was speaking to him telepathically. "Please," the voice whispered in his mind. "Protect her. Keep her safe until her mother comes. She is precious. She is important. Promise me." Jake felt tears burn his eyes. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know the child. But the desperate love of a dying guardian was something that transcended species and language. He reached out and placed his hand over the woman's hand where it rested on the child's head. "I promise," he said aloud. "I'll keep her safe." The woman's eyes closed, and Jake felt the telepathic presence fade like a candle being blown out. She was gone. The child seemed to sense it too because she began to cry, a high-pitched keening sound that cut through Jake's heart like a blade. "We need to get them both back to the ship," Jake said quietly. "Now." Marcus helped Jake carefully lift the child while Lisa wrapped the woman's body in a thermal blanket. The little girl fought at first, not wanting to leave the guardian, but she was too weak and frightened to resist much. Jake held her close to his chest, and she eventually went still, trembling against him. As they made their way back to the Horizon's Edge, the ship's sensors began screaming warnings. "Commander, "We have 3 vessels approaching fast," reported the bridge officer through the radio. "They're not responding to hails and their weapons are hot." "Get us out of here," Jake ordered, moving faster through the ruined ship. "Prepare for emergency departure." They barely made it back to their ship before the raiders arrived. Jake had just strapped the Valari child into a seat in the medical bay when the first weapons hit their shields. The Horizon's Edge shuddered and began to flee, engines pushing to maximum power. "Who are they?" Marcus shouted from his station as another blast rocked the ship. "I don't know," Jake replied, "but they want this child. That's the only thing that makes sense." For the next hour, the Horizon's Edge ran through the asteroid field with 3 raider ships in pursuit. Jake's crew was skilled, and they used every trick they knew. They hid behind asteroids, used debris as cover, and pushed their engines beyond safe limits. Slowly, they began to put distance between themselves and their attackers. In the medical bay, Lisa worked to care for the frightened alien child. She tried to feed her, but the little one refused everything. She tried to comfort her with soft words, but the child just stared with huge, terrified eyes. The girl hadn't made a sound since they left the destroyed ship. Jake came to check on her whenever he could step away from the bridge. Each time, the child would track him with her eyes, watching his every movement. There was something in her gaze, a desperate search for safety, for trust, for anything familiar in a universe that had turned violent and strange. "She won't eat," Lisa said quietly during one of his visits. "She won't sleep. She's in shock, Jake. Her people are telepathic and form strong emotional bonds. She just lost her guardian, witnessed her crew being killed, and now she's surrounded by aliens. I don't know how to help her." Jake sat down slowly next to the bed where the child lay curled in a ball. He didn't try to touch her. He just sat there, present and calm. After a moment, he started to hum. It was an old song, a lullaby his mother had sung to him when he was young and couldn't sleep. He didn't know if the melody would mean anything to an alien child, but it was all he had to offer. The child's eyes widened slightly. Her trembling eased just a fraction. Jake kept humming, the simple tune filling the quiet medical bay. Minutes passed, then an hour. Lisa worked at her station, occasionally glancing over with surprise and hope. Finally, as Jake reached the end of the lullaby for the 10th time, the child uncurled slightly. Her small hand reached out, not quite touching Jake, but moving toward him. He held very still, barely breathing. The hand dropped onto his knee, so light he almost didn't feel it. But the touch was there, a tiny bridge of trust beginning to form. "That's it," he whispered softly. "You're safe now. I promised I'd protect you, and I will." The child didn't understand his words, but maybe she understood his tone. Maybe she felt his sincerity. Or maybe, as Lisa later theorized, she sensed something through whatever telepathic abilities she possessed. Whatever the reason, the little girl's eyes began to droop. Exhaustion was finally winning over fear. Jake stayed beside her all night while she slept fitfully. Every time she whimpered or stirred, he would hum the lullaby again and she would settle. The raiders had stopped pursuing them for now, but Jake knew they would be back. Whoever wanted this child wasn't going to give up easily. As the ship's artificial morning cycle began, Lisa brought Jake a cup of coffee. "You should rest, Commander. You've been up for 20 hours. "I can't leave her," Jake said simply. "I made a promise." Lisa smiled sadly. "I know. But Jake, you need to understand something about the Valari. Their children bond intensely with caregivers. It's biological, telepathic, deep. If you become her anchor, her safe person, separating from you later could be traumatic for her." Jake looked at the sleeping child, so small and vulnerable. "Then we'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now, she needs someone. She needs to know she's not alone." He reached out and gently adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. The little girl stirred and her hand found his again, gripping his finger with surprising strength. Even in sleep, she was holding on to the one person who had promised to keep her safe. Jake settled back into his chair, his coffee growing cold in his other hand. Through the window, stars streaked past as the Horizon's Edge continued its flight through unfamiliar space. Somewhere out there was the child's mother, probably terrified, searching desperately for her daughter. Somewhere behind them were raiders who wanted to harm this innocent little girl. 3 days had passed since they rescued the child from the destroyed Valari ship, and the situation aboard the Horizon's Edge had grown more complicated. The raiders kept finding them no matter how cleverly Marcus plotted their course. It was like the attacking ships had some way to track them through the vastness of space. Jake spent almost every free moment with the alien child. The crew had started calling her Lyria, a name they found in the damaged datapad recovered from her ship. She was still frightened and confused, but slowly, very slowly, she was beginning to trust Jake. She would eat now, but only if he sat beside her. She would sleep, but only if she could see him or hear his voice. Lisa worried about this growing attachment, but what choice did they have? The child needed someone, and Jake seemed to be the only person she would respond to. Every time another crew member tried to help, Lyria would shrink back, her eyes wide with fear. But when Jake appeared, her small face would relax, and she would reach for him. "She's bonding with you," Lisa explained one morning as they watched Lyria play with a puzzle Jake had made for her from spare parts. "It's deeper than normal attachment. I've been reading everything I can find about Valari psychology. Their children form telepathic bonds with their caregivers. It's how they feel safe. Without it, they can become severely traumatized." Jake rubbed his tired eyes. He hadn't slept properly in days, catching only brief naps in the chair beside Lyria's bed. "So what do we do? We can't keep running forever. We need to find her family." "We've been trying," Marcus said, entering the medical bay with a datapad. "I've sent messages to every Valari contact channel we could find. So far, nothing. Either they're not receiving our messages or they're not responding to humans." Another alarm blared through the ship. The raiders had found them again. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he heard the crew rushing to battle stations. Lyria heard it too, and she immediately began to whimper, the memory of the attack on her ship obviously still fresh and terrifying. "It's okay," Jake said softly, kneeling beside her. He took her small hands in his. "I promised to keep you safe, remember? I keep my promises." The ship shook as weapons fire hit their shields. Lyria cried out, a sound of pure terror, and threw herself into Jake's arms. He held her tight, feeling her small body trembling against his chest. Through the open door, he could hear Marcus shouting orders and the crew responding. Another blast, stronger this time. "We need to get to a safer area," Lisa urged. "The medical bay isn't armored." Jake nodded and lifted Lyria, carrying her quickly through the corridors toward the ship's protected core. Other crew members rushed past them, focused on their duties. The Horizon's Edge wasn't a military vessel. It was built for exploration, for discovery, not for combat. Every fight with the raiders pushed their shields and systems closer to failure. They reached the reinforced storage area where the crew had set up an emergency shelter. Several other non-essential personnel were already there, their faces tight with worry. Jake sat down in a corner, still holding Lyria. She had her face buried in his shoulder, and he could feel her tears soaking through his uniform. "It's okay," he kept saying. "We're safe here. I've got you." The battle raged for nearly an hour. The Horizon's Edge twisted and turned through space, using every trick to shake their pursuers. Jake felt each impact through the floor, heard the groan of stressed metal and the whine of overtaxed engines. Lyria flinched with every sound, her small fingers digging into his arms. Then came the sound that Jake had been dreading. A massive explosion, very close. The lights went out, replaced by dim emergency lighting that cast everything in red. Alarms screamed. People shouted. And then Jake heard the most terrifying sound of all, the hiss of atmosphere escaping through a hull breach. "Breach in Section 7, someone yelled through the intercom. "Everyone in protective gear now." Section 7 was right next to where they were sheltering. Jake's mind raced. They had maybe minutes before the air pressure dropped dangerously low. He looked around frantically and saw an emergency locker. Inside were breath masks, but not enough for everyone. Marcus's voice came through the intercom, tight with stress. "We're sealing Section 7. Emergency doors coming down in 30 seconds. Anyone not clear needs to move now." Jake made a decision in a heartbeat. He grabbed 2 breath masks and ran toward the door, still carrying Lyria. Behind him, Lisa shouted for him to stop, but he was already in the corridor. Debris floated through the air where artificial gravity had failed. Through the smoke and chaos, Jake could see the emergency door beginning to close, its heavy metal designed to contain a breach and save the rest of the ship. But he could also see 3 crew members on the wrong side of that door, struggling to reach safety. One of them was Kate Morgan, the young engineer who had only joined them 6 months ago. She was trying to help an injured colleague, but they were moving too slowly. Jake ran toward them, his boots magnetizing to the floor to keep him grounded. He reached them just as the door was halfway closed. "Put this on," he shouted, shoving a breath mask at Kate. He helped her get the injured crew member through the closing gap, then pushed Kate through after. The door was nearly sealed now, just a meter of space left. Jake turned to go back through, but his foot caught on a piece of twisted metal. He fell hard and Lyria tumbled from his arms. The child screamed, a sound that cut through all the noise and chaos. Jake lunged for her, caught her, and rolled toward the closing door. He almost made it. The door sealed with a heavy clang, and Jake felt a moment of relief. They were on the safe side. But then he felt the pain. The door had closed on his shoulder and part of his back, catching him in the last second of his roll to protect Lyria. The weight of the heavy metal pressed down, and Jake bit back a scream. "Commander!" Marcus was there suddenly, hitting the emergency release. The door retracted just enough to free Jake, and he fell forward, still clutching Lyria. The door sealed again behind them, and Jake heard the hiss of the atmosphere stop. They had contained the breach, but Jake couldn't focus on that. The pain in his shoulder was blinding, radiating down his back and arm. He could feel something warm running down his side. Blood. His blood. But through it all, his arms stayed locked around Lyria, protecting her small body with his own. Lisa was beside them in seconds, her medical scanner already working. "Jake, I need you to let go of her so I can examine you." "Is she hurt?" Jake gasped. "Check her first." Lisa quickly scanned Lyria, who was crying but appeared physically unharmed. "She's fine. Now let me look at you." Jake finally released his grip, and Lyria immediately tried to cling back to him. Lisa had to gently pull the child away while Kate held Jake steady. The scan made Lisa's face go pale. "You've got a fractured shoulder blade, damaged muscles in your back, and a piece of metal lodged near your spine. Jake, you need surgery. Now." They got Jake to the medical bay, though every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his body. Lisa worked quickly, using the ship's automated surgical systems to remove the metal fragment and repair what damage she could. The procedure took hours, and Jake was unconscious for all of it, sedated heavily to manage the pain. When he woke, the first thing he saw was Lyria. The child had somehow gotten past whoever was watching her and was sitting on the floor beside his bed. Her large eyes were fixed on his face, tears streaming down her cheeks. The moment Jake's eyes opened, she made a small sound and reached for him. "Hey," Jake whispered, his voice rough from the sedation. He tried to move his arm and immediately regretted it. Pain flared, but he pushed through it to extend his hand toward her. "I'm okay, see? Still here." Lyria's small hand gripped his finger, and Jake felt something strange. It was like a warmth spreading from where they touched, moving up his arm and into his chest. It wasn't physical. It was something else, something he couldn't quite name. For just a moment he felt what she felt. Fear, relief, love, and a desperate need to stay close to the person who had protected her. Lisa entered the medical bay and stopped short when she saw them. Her expression was complicated, a mix of medical concern and something like wonder. "Jake, you need to rest. Your body has been through a trauma." "I know," he said quietly, "but she needs me right now." "That's what I'm worried about," Lisa said, but her tone was gentle. She came closer and knelt beside Lyria. "I've been monitoring both of you. Jake, what you're feeling right now, that connection, it's not just emotional. The Valari bond telepathically with their caregivers. Lyria has bonded with you. Deeply." Jake looked at the child holding his hand like it was her only anchor in a terrifying universe. "What does that mean?" "It means that to her, you're not just someone who is taking care of her. You're her family now. You're her safety, her home. The bond will only get stronger the more time you spend together." Lisa hesitated. "When we find her mother, separating them might not be as simple as handing her over." Jake wanted to say something, but exhaustion was pulling him back down. His eyes closed, and the last thing he felt before sleep claimed him was Lyria's small hand gripping his finger, refusing to let go even as he drifted away. Over the next week, as Jake recovered from his injuries, the bond between him and Lyria grew even stronger. She would cry if he was out of. The massive Valari warship appeared on their sensors like a rising sun, enormous and impossible to miss. The Star Weaver was 5 times the size of the horizon's edge, its hull covered in patterns that seemed to shift and glow with inner light. Smaller escort ships surrounded it like protective satellites, their weapons clearly visible and ready. Jake stood on the bridge, watching the approaching fleet with a mixture of relief and dread. Beside him, Lyria stood on a chair so she could see out the window, her small hand gripping his sleeve. She had been increasingly anxious all morning, perhaps sensing through their bond that something big was about to happen. "They're hailing us," Marcus reported. "Audio and visual. Put it through," Jake said quietly. The screen flickered to life and Jake found himself looking at a Valari woman who took his breath away. She was tall and elegant like all her species, but there was something more to her. Patterns on her skin glowed with a soft blue light, marking her as royalty. Her eyes were the same unusual color as Lyria's, a deep purple that seemed to look right through him. Her expression was controlled, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the arms of her chair. "I am Princess Solara of the House of Lightbringers," she said. Her voice translated through their communication system. "You have my daughter." "Yes," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. "She's safe. We've been caring for her since we found her ship destroyed in the Kepler sector." Solara's composure cracked for just a moment. Her eyes closed and she took a shaky breath. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I need to see her now." Jake looked down at Lyria, who was staring at the screen with wide eyes. He wasn't sure if she recognized the woman on the display. She had been so young when taken from her mother, and trauma could confuse a child's memory. He bent down to her level. "Lyria," he said softly, "that's your mother. She's come to take you home." Lyria looked at the screen, then back at Jake. Her small hand tightened on his sleeve and she leaned against his leg. She made a soft sound, uncertain and questioning. "We're bringing your ships together now," Marcus said diplomatically. "Princess Solara, you can board and reunite with your daughter." "No," Solara said quickly. "Send her to me. I want her brought to my ship immediately." Jake felt something protective rise in his chest. "With respect, Princess, she's been through a terrible trauma. She needs familiar faces right now. I'll bring her to you myself, but we should do this carefully." Solara's eyes narrowed slightly and Jake got the distinct impression she was not used to being told what to do. But after a moment she nodded. "Very well. You may escort her to my ship, but be quick about it." An hour later, Jake found himself walking through the corridors of the Starweaver with Lyria in his arms. The Valari ship was beautiful, all flowing designs and soft lights that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Guards flanked them, tall warriors in armor that gleamed like pearl. They watched Jake with expressions that were impossible to read. Lyria had buried her face in Jake's shoulder, overwhelmed by the new environment and the presence of so many strangers. He kept murmuring to her, trying to keep her calm. "It's okay. We're going to see your mother. She loves you so much. She's been looking for you." They entered a large chamber that looked like it served as both an office and a throne room, and there, standing in the center, was Princess Solara. In person, she was even more imposing. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her presence commanding the entire space. The moment Lyria saw her, the child went very still. Her head lifted from Jake's shoulder, and she stared at the woman who had given birth to her. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Solara's carefully controlled expression shattered. "Lyria," she whispered, and the love in her voice was so powerful it made Jake's throat tight. Lyria made a small sound and reached toward her mother. Jake carefully set the child down, and Lyria ran on her small legs across the space between them. Solara dropped to her knees and caught her daughter, pulling the child against her chest. Her whole body shook as she held Lyria, one hand cradling the small head, the other wrapped protectively around her back. Jake watched this reunion and felt his eyes burn. This was what should happen. This was right. A child belonged with her mother. But at the same time, he felt something tear inside his chest as Lyria's hand released its grip on him. He took a step back, giving them space, giving them privacy for this moment they both desperately needed. Solara was speaking in her own language, words that the translator didn't pick up, probably too emotional and quick for the device to process. But Jake didn't need a translation to understand. He had heard that tone before in countless languages across countless worlds. It was the sound of a mother who had thought she lost everything and found hope again. But then Lyria did something unexpected. She pulled back from her mother and looked around. Her eyes found Jake where he stood near the door, and she reached for him, making a distressed sound. Solara's expression changed instantly. Her eyes, which had been soft with love and relief, went hard as she looked at Jake. She held Lyria tighter, turning slightly to put herself between her daughter and the human. "Why is she looking for you?" There was an edge to her voice now, something sharp and dangerous. "She's bonded with Commander Morrison," Lisa spoke up. She had accompanied them to provide medical information. "It's a psychological attachment formed during trauma. He's been her primary caregiver for the past 2 weeks." Solara's glowing markings brightened, a sign of strong emotion. "Bonded? What do you mean, bonded?" Lisa explained about the telepathic connection, about how Lyria had been so traumatized that she would only respond to Jake, about how he had protected her and cared for her. As she spoke, Jake watched Solara's face cycle through several emotions: understanding, gratitude, anger, and something that looked like fear. "I see," Solara said quietly when Lisa finished. She looked down at Lyria, who was still reaching for Jake, becoming more distressed by the second. "And how strong is this bond?" "Very strong," Lisa admitted. "Separating them suddenly could be traumatic for Lyria. We recommend a gradual process." Solara stood slowly, still holding Lyria. The child was crying now, actually fighting against her mother's hold. Her arms stretched toward Jake. It was breaking Jake's heart, but he stayed where he was. He wouldn't undermine Solara's authority or make this harder than it already was. But Solara made a decision. She walked toward Jake, and he could see the internal struggle on her face. When she was close enough, she carefully shifted Lyria so the child could touch Jake's hand. The moment their skin connected, Lyria calmed, though tears still ran down her face. "This is not right," Solara said, her voice tight. "I am her mother. I carried her, I raised her, I have loved her every day of her life. And now she reaches for you, a stranger, an alien." "I know," Jake said quietly. "I'm sorry. I never meant to take your place. I just tried to keep her alive." Solara studied his face for a long moment. Jake met her eyes steadily, letting her see whatever she needed to see. Finally, she spoke again, and her voice was slightly softer. "Tell me what happened, everything." So Jake did. He told her about finding the destroyed ship, about the dying guardian who had begged him to protect Lyria, about the promise he had made. He told her about the raiders who kept attacking them, about how Lyria had been so traumatized she wouldn't eat or sleep. He told her about the lullabies, the simple games, the slow building of trust. And he told her about the hull breach, about how he had been injured protecting her daughter. As he spoke, Solara listened with an expression that grew more and more complex. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Lyria had calmed now, content to be held by her mother as long as she could maintain physical contact with Jake. "You kept your promise," Solara finally said. "You protected my daughter when I could not. For that I owe you a debt I can never fully repay." "You don't owe me anything," Jake said. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Solara said firmly. "Not anyone. I have learned much about humans in the time I have been searching for my daughter. You are a species of great contradictions. Some of you are capable of terrible things, but others like you are capable of profound selflessness." She paused. "My daughter's guardian before she died chose well when she chose you." "What happens now?" Marcus asked from behind Jake. Solara looked at her daughter, then at Jake. "Now we face a problem. Dr. Chen says that separating them suddenly would harm Lyria, but I cannot leave my daughter with you. She belongs with her people, with her family, with me." "I understand," Jake said, though the words hurt to say. "I'll do whatever is best for Lyria." "Then you will come with us," Solara declared. The room went silent. Jake stared at her. "What?" "You will come to our homeworld. You will stay near my daughter while we work to gradually transfer her bond from you to me and others of our people. It may take weeks or months, but I will not risk my daughter's mental health." Solara's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "This is not a request, Commander. It is the price of my daughter's well-being." Jake looked at Marcus, who seemed as shocked as he felt. To go with them meant leaving his ship, his crew, his mission. It meant entering a completely alien culture where he would be a stranger, dependent on the royal palace on Valara Prime was the most beautiful prison Jake had ever seen. His quarters were larger than his entire apartment back on Earth, filled with furniture that seemed to grow from the floor itself, organic and elegant. Windows looked out over gardens that glowed softly in the evening light, and the walls changed color based on his mood, sensing his emotions in a way that felt both fascinating and invasive. But for all its beauty, it was still a cage. Guards stood outside his door at all times. He could only go where he was permitted. He could only see Lyria during scheduled times that grew shorter each week. and every movement he made was watched, judged, and reported back to Princess Solara. 3 weeks had passed since they arrived, and Jake felt the isolation starting to wear on him. Lisa visited when she could, her own quarters in the medical wing of the palace, but she was often busy consulting with Valari physicians. The rest of the time, Jake was alone with his thoughts in the strange, beautiful prison that surrounded him. He stood at his window now, watching the sun set over the alien landscape. Valara Prime was stunning, with cities that looked like they had been grown rather than built, towers of crystal and living metal reaching toward purple skies. But it wasn't home. And Jake was starting to wonder if he would ever see home again. A soft chime announced a visitor. Jake turned from the window as the door opened, and he was surprised to see Princess Solara herself enter. She rarely came to his quarters, usually summoning him to hers when she wanted to speak. Her presence here felt significant somehow. "Princess," Jake said, giving a small bow. He had learned some Valari customs, enough to be polite. "Commander," she replied, her voice neutral. "I wanted to speak with you about Lyria's progress." Jake gestured to the sitting area, and they both sat, though Solara's posture remained formal and controlled. Jake had learned to read her body language over the past weeks. She was always so carefully composed, every emotion locked behind walls of duty and responsibility. "How is she doing?" Jake asked, though he already had some idea. His time with Lyria had been reduced to 2 hours per day, then 1 hour, and now just 30 minutes in the morning. Each reduction hurt both for him and for Lyria, who would cry when their time ended. "She is adjusting," Solara said carefully. "The bond between you is weakening as we hoped. She no longer panics when you are not present. She is beginning to bond more strongly with me and her caretakers." "That's good," Jake said, and meant it, even though it felt like losing something precious. "That's what we wanted." Solara was quiet for a moment, her luminescent markings pulsing slowly with some emotion Jake couldn't identify. "Is it?" she finally asked. Jake looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I have watched you with my daughter, Commander. I have seen your face when your time ends and you must leave her. I have seen how you linger at the door, how you look back. This is hurting you." "Of course it's hurting me," Jake admitted. "I love her, but she's not mine. She's yours. This was always temporary." "Love," Solara repeated the word like she was tasting it. "You use that word so easily. In our culture, such bonds are sacred. The fact that Lyria bonded with you so deeply should not have been possible. It suggests something extraordinary about you or about her need, or perhaps about both." Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he stayed quiet. After a moment, Solara continued, her voice softer now. "I need to explain something to you, Commander. Something about my position here." She paused as if deciding how much to reveal. "I am a widow. My mate died when Lyria was very young, killed by the same rival house that tried to have her assassinated. Since then, I have ruled alone, raising my daughter while navigating political dangers that you cannot imagine." "That sounds incredibly difficult," Jake said quietly. "It is, and the fact that my daughter bonded with an outsider, with an alien, has given my enemies ammunition against me. They whisper that I failed to protect her. They say that she needed you because I was not enough." Solara's markings brightened with emotion. "They are wrong." But the whispers still hurt. Jake felt a wave of guilt. "I'm sorry. I never meant to cause problems for you." "I know," Solara said, and for the first time she looked directly into his eyes without the usual walls between them. "That is why this is so complicated. You saved my daughter. You cared for her with a gentleness that surprised me. You have asked for nothing in return. And yet your very presence here challenges everything my people believe about bonds and family and proper behavior." "Then let me go," Jake said, though the words hurt. "If I'm causing problems, I'll leave. Lyria is doing better. She doesn't need me anymore, doesn't she?" Solara asked. "This morning when you were with her, she laughed. She has not laughed since before the attack until today. And it was because you were making silly faces and playing that human game with your hands, the one with the spider." Despite the serious conversation, Jake smiled slightly. "Itsy Bitsy Spider. It's a children's song." "She loves it," Solara said softly. "She asks for it constantly, even though none of us can perform it the way you do." She paused. "Commander Morrison, I asked you here tonight because I need to be honest with you. The plan was to gradually transfer Lyria's bond to me, and then send you home. But I am beginning to realize that may not be possible." Jake's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" I mean that the bond you share with my daughter may not be something that can be transferred or broken without causing her harm. Dr. Chen has been consulting with our best physicians, and they all agree that Lyria has formed what we call a guardian bond. It is rare, powerful, and essentially permanent. Permanent? Jake stood up, suddenly agitated. That's not possible. She's bonding with you. You said so yourself. She is bonding with me again, yes, but the bond with you remains. It has not weakened as much as we hoped. Instead, it seems to have stabilized. Solara stood as well, her height making Jake have to look up slightly. In our culture, this would mean that you are recognized as her guardian, a role just below parent but above all others. It would mean you have a permanent place in her life. But I can't stay here forever, Jake said, panic rising in his voice. I have a life. I have a career. I have a home. I know, Solara said, and there was something in her voice that made Jake look at her more carefully. And that is the problem I face. How do I do what is best for my daughter while also being fair to you? How do I balance her needs with your freedom? They stood there in the fading light. Two people from different worlds trying to solve an impossible problem. After a long moment, Solara spoke again, and her voice was gentler than Jake had ever heard it. There is a Valari law, ancient and rarely used. It allows a ruling family to adopt a guardian into their house. The guardian becomes legally bound to the family, with duties and responsibilities, but also with rights and protections. They are not a servant or a prisoner. They are family. Jake stared at her. You want to adopt me? I am considering it, Solara admitted. It would solve several problems. It would give you legal status here, protection from those who question your presence. It would formalize your role with Lyria, and it would allow you to remain part of her life without the constant uncertainty. And the problems it would cause? Jake asked. Solara's markings pulsed brightly. Many. My political enemies would use it against me. Some would say I'm elevating an alien above our own people. Others would question my judgment. And there would be expectations, responsibilities that you would have to fulfill. Like what? You would be bound to my house, to my daughter for the rest of your life. You could not leave without permission. You would have to learn our ways, our language, our customs. You would represent our family in certain matters. She paused. And in our culture, a guardian adopted in this way is considered part of the parent's inner circle. You would be my partner in raising Lyria, which comes with its own complications. Jake walked back to the window, his mind racing. What she was describing sounded like a life sentence, but it also sounded like belonging, like purpose, like being part of something important. I need time to think, he said quietly. Of course, Solara said. I am giving you 3 days to decide. After that, I must make a decision about your future here one way or another. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Commander, I want you to know something. When I first learned that my daughter had bonded with you, I was angry, jealous. I felt like you had taken something from me, but I have watched you these past weeks. I have seen your sacrifice, your patience, your love for a child who is not even your own species, and I have come to respect you deeply. Thank you, Jake said, surprised by the admission. I hope you will stay, Solara said softly. Not just for Lyria, but because I believe you belong here with us. I believe that perhaps fate or destiny or whatever power guides the universe brought you to my daughter for a reason that goes beyond simple rescue. Then she was gone, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and an impossible decision weighing on his shoulders. Over the next 3 days, Jake struggled with the choice before him. He talked with Lisa, who told him she supported whatever he decided, but reminded him that he had a gift for connecting with Lyria that was truly special. He contacted Marcus via long-range communication, and the ceremony was scheduled for 2 weeks after Jake made his decision. 2 weeks that should have been filled with preparation and anticipation, but instead were filled with growing political tension. Word of Princess Solara's intention to formally adopt a human into the royal house had leaked, and the reaction was exactly as explosive as she had predicted. The Valari High Council demanded an audience. They arrived at the palace like a storm, 12 of the most powerful figures in Valari society, their markings blazing with indignation. Jake was not allowed to attend the meeting, but he could hear the raised voices echoing through the halls. Lisa found him in his quarters afterward, her face pale. It's bad, she said. The council is threatening to strip Solara of some of her authority if she goes through with this. They're saying it violates tradition, that it sets a dangerous precedent, that it makes them look weak to other species. Jake felt sick. She could lose her power because of me? She's fighting for you, Lisa said. I've never seen anything like it. She stood before the entire council and defended not just your right to stay, but your value to her family. She told them that Lyria's well-being was more important than their political concerns. Some of them walked out. Jake stood and paced the room. I should refuse the adoption. I should leave. I'm not worth this kind of trouble for her. You tried to refuse, Lisa reminded him. She said no. Jake, I think there's more going on here than just Lyria. What do you mean? Lisa gave him a knowing look. I mean, I've seen the way Solara looks at you when she thinks no one is watching. I've seen how she lights up when you're in the room, and I've seen you doing the same thing. Jake opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Because if he was being honest with himself, Lisa was right. Over the past weeks, something had changed between him and Solara. The formal distance had gradually softened into something warmer. They had started having dinner together while Lyria ate, discussing their days and sharing stories about their very different lives. They had laughed together, worked together to care for Lyria, and slowly built something that felt like friendship. Or maybe something more. It doesn't matter how I feel, Jake said quietly. She's a princess. I'm just a human from Earth, and right now I'm causing her nothing but problems. Before Lisa could respond, the door opened and Solara herself entered. She looked tired, her usually perfect composure slightly frayed. The guards tried to follow her in, but she waved them away with a sharp gesture. Leave us, she commanded, and the guards reluctantly backed out. When they were alone, Solara's shoulders sagged slightly, showing a vulnerability Jake had rarely seen. The council has given me an ultimatum, she said without preamble. Either I send you away immediately, or they will begin proceedings to question my fitness to rule and my ability to protect Lyria. Jake felt his world tilt. Then you have to send me away. You can't risk losing Lyria. They cannot take Lyria from me, Solara said firmly. I am her mother and the head of our house. But they can make my life extremely difficult. They can block my initiatives, oppose my decisions, and undermine my authority at every turn. She moved to the window, looking out at her city. They fear change. They fear anything that threatens their comfortable worldview. So what are you going to do? Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Solara turned to face him and her eyes were blazing with determination. I am going to proceed with the adoption. I am going to stand before my people and formally bring you into my house, and I am going to dare the council to do their worst. You'll destroy your political career for me? Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why would you do that? Because it is the right thing to do, Solara said. Because my daughter needs you. Because you have proven yourself worthy of respect and consideration. And because I am tired of letting fear and tradition dictate my choices. She crossed the room until she was standing directly in front of Jake. They were close, enough that he could see the patterns of her markings shifting with emotion, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. I have another reason, she said softly, one that I have been afraid to acknowledge even to myself. What reason? Jake's voice was barely a whisper. I do not want you to leave because I have come to care for you. Not just as Lyria's guardian, not just as someone who saved my daughter, but as you, as Jake. As the person who makes me laugh with his strange human humor, who challenges me when I am being too rigid, who looks at me like I am more than just a title and a crown. Jake's heart was pounding. Solara, you do not have to say anything, she interrupted. I know the complications. I know the scandal this would cause. I know that I am asking you to give up so much for a life that may be difficult and constrained. But I need you to know the truth before you make your final decision. I need you to know that if you stay, it will not just be for Lyria. It will be for all of us, including me. Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring through the palace. Solara's communicator lit up and she answered it quickly. Her face went pale as she listened. What is it? Jake asked. The rival house has made their move, Solara said, her voice tight with controlled panic. There's been a breach in the palace defenses. They're coming for Lyria. Everything happened very quickly after that. Guards rushed through the corridors. Solara ran toward Lyria's rooms with Jake right behind her. They found the child already awake, frightened by the alarms and the shouting. Her caretakers were trying to move her to a secure location, but Lyria was fighting them, calling for her mother and for Jake. I'm here, Jake said, reaching her first. He scooped her up and felt her immediately calm slightly in his arms. We've got you. You're safe. They've breached the east wing, a guard reported. We need to get the princess and the heir to the secure vault. They ran through the palace, a group of guards surrounding them, weapons drawn. Jake held Lyria tight against his chest, using his body to shield her. Beside him, Solara moved with deadly grace, a weapon in her own hand that she clearly knew how to use. They almost made it to the vault. But then explosions rocked the corridor ahead and figures in dark armor appeared, blocking their path. The guards engaged them immediately, weapon fire lighting up the hallway with brilliant flashes. Back, Solara commanded. We need to find another route. They turned and ran the other way, but more attackers appeared behind them. They were being herded, trapped. Jake's mind raced, looking for options, for any way to protect Lyria and Solara. Then he saw it. A maintenance shaft in the wall, small enough that the attackers in their bulky armor couldn't follow, but big enough for him and Lyria. There, he said to Solara. I can get Lyria through that shaft. It should lead to the lower levels where there are more guards. Solara looked at the shaft, then at Jake, and he saw the decision warring on her face. Trust him with her daughter's life or try to fight their way through overwhelming odds. Go, she said. Take her. Keep her safe. Jake pried open the shaft cover and climbed in, holding Lyria tight. She was crying now, reaching back for her mother. It's okay, Jake whispered. We'll find her again. I promise. He heard weapon fire behind him as he crawled through the shaft, moving as fast as he could while protecting Lyria. The shaft was dark and cramped, but Jake kept moving, driven by desperation and the promise he had made so long ago to a dying guardian. When he finally emerged in a lower corridor, he found himself face to face with a squad of loyal palace guards. They immediately surrounded him and Lyria, weapons up, checking for threats. Commander Morrison, the squad leader said, We've been looking for you. Where is the princess? She stayed back to hold them off, Jake said, his chest tight with fear. We need to go back for her. Our orders are to secure the heir first, the guard said firmly. Come with us. They took Jake and Lyria to the secure vault, a reinforced room deep in the palace designed to withstand almost any attack. Lisa was already there, having been evacuated earlier. She immediately checked Lyria over, making sure the child was unharmed. Where's Solara? Lisa asked. I don't know, Jake said, and the not knowing was killing him. She was fighting when I left her. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Jake held Lyria, who had gone silent with shock, her small body trembling. He hummed the lullaby to her, the same one he had sung that first night, trying to comfort them both. Finally, the vault door opened and Solara strode in. She was disheveled, her clothes torn and marked with scorch marks from weapon fire, but she was alive. The relief that flooded through Jake was so powerful it made his knees weak. Lyria cried out and reached for her mother. Solara took her daughter, holding her close, but her eyes were on Jake. You kept her safe, she said. Always, Jake replied. The attack had been repelled. 5 palace guards had died along with 8 of the attackers. The remainder had been captured and were being interrogated. But the message was clear. The rival house was willing to be bold, to strike at the heart of Solara's power. In the aftermath, as the palace was secured and the wounded were tended to, the High Council gathered again. But this time they were not angry or indignant. They were shaken. One of their own had been directly attacked, and it had been a human who had saved the heir. The head of the council, an ancient Valari named Keeper Thorn,